Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how CEOs, founders, and senior executives sell their ideas, point of view, and personal brand to the people who matter most. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want to build market eminence, amplify your influence, and attract high-value prospects, investors, partners, talent, and media opportunities with less chasing and more confidence. Let's go. You know, not a lot of people like this show. In fact, this show that we're on right here, it has some haters. You know, people really, they don't like the show. They don't like me. And I've got someone here who's going to tell you why that's not terrible news. The awesome, the amazing Laura Ries, welcome to the show. Your new book is The Strategic Enemy, and do I have a whole bunch of them?
Well, that's a good thing. Absolutely. That means you're getting people's attention. You're upping the ante, upping the excitement.
Yes. For the small number of people on the planet who do not know who you are, would you just please give us a 60-second overview of your professional journey that brought you to the amazing work that you're doing today?
Sure. My father was Ries, enough said. He wrote a book that became very famous called Positioning the Battle for Your Mind with his previous partner, Jack Trout. And that changed marketing and it made him a success. It taught everyone that it's not what you do out there. It's not what you're trying to communicate. But the first and most important thing is what position do you own in the mind? And that is the forefront of my father's career. I've joined him, worked together for almost 30 years until he passed at almost 96 in 2022.
Wow, amazing. And it's funny, I think in the preface of one of your previous books, he shares the story of, because people would say, Al, how did you get Laura to join your company? And so I think you graduated college and then within 1 year, you asked him, you wanted to join the company. And of course, you also had some beautiful background in the advertising world. And then you went to join him in his marketing strategy positioning world. What would you say are the differences between that world of advertising that you had been planted in versus moving then into the marketing strategy world?
Well, yeah. I mean, from a young age, actually, when I first read in middle school, I had the book on my shelf. I read the book Positioning and fell in love with the concept and fell in love with my father in a different, more professional way of, wow, what he's doing is really cool. And I like to say it was kind of an unspoken thing that I would eventually go into the business, maybe be with him, but we didn't talk about it. I mean, he that was his favorite quote that, people would always ask him, how'd you get your daughter? Well, he didn't tell me I had to do it. And I didn't say, Dad, you had to hire me. It was a mutual coming together. And so, after, college, I did work for a whole year at TBWA Advertising in New York City. I had an internship and then they hired me and it was a great learning experience. But what I really wanted to do was to be like my dad. I wanted to give clients real advice. The biggest problem at sitting in the agency in the meetings, even though I was a junior, you couldn't really tell them too strongly because you wanted their account. Right. And you wanted to keep the advertising machine going. The answer was always more advertising. And I knew that that wasn't necessarily the case. And sometimes they needed new brands or they needed PR. And so that, freedom of being a consultant was really exciting. And then, of course, I did think about going to business school, but, I thought, what am I doing? Why waste any time here? My father can give me the best education, in terms of business that anyone on the planet could. So I ditched that idea pretty quickly. I saved my money and we got together and, the rest is history.
Amazing. Really, really great. Well, I want to talk about your new book, but I will tell you the previous books of yours that I've read are such a rapid fire collection of big idea, strategic insight, example. Next big idea, next strategic insight, example. So whether we're talking about the visual hammer, whether we're talking about having a battle cry, and I think all of these are somehow baked in to some small or medium extent in the new book, The Strategic Enemy. right? Because you absolutely have to have a visual hammer. And
Yeah,
obviously, what you say, words matter when you're painting the picture of who this enemy is. So, talk a little bit about where the strategic enemy concept plays into your work and why you felt it was worthy of a standalone book.
Yeah, well, it's such an important principle. And listen, everything stems from positioning. I mean, that was the original concept. And all of the books have kind of built on it, that foundation in different ways, whether it was talking about the fall of advertising or the rise of PR or origin of brands, how the endless opportunities to create new categories and new brands. And, you mentioned Visual Hammer and the battle cry. But what was missing, and most all the books, the concepts came from the working with clients and studying case histories. And what was really interesting is that, positioning was always thought about, what are you doing? What do you want to own, right? Where are you in the mind? But really the most important critical aspect was, what can you contrast against, right? The best way to get into the mind is almost not to just say you're better or say we're this, but to say what you're not. The contrast between what you're not and who that enemy is makes your positioning ultra clear. And you go back to ideas like BMW and the ultimate driving machine, one of the greatest positioning slogans ever. But it also had a very clear strategic enemy. Because who was that? Mercedes-Benz. And one of the classic ads was the ultimate sitting machine versus the ultimate driving machine. You see, Mercedes was comfort, right? It's lovely. You don't feel the road. You don't know you're going 90 miles an hour. And listen, there's no one brand for everybody. And so it wasn't saying that Mercedes was bad or wrong. It was just different. And that's the key opportunity. And actually, it makes selling positioning stronger when you can say, we have to say what we're not to more clearly communicate what we are.
Yes. I know that in one of your favorite anti-positioning story, I'm a BMW driver. So I love BMW. I would never drive a Mercedes. I wouldn't even look at a Mercedes. But you talk about how BMW came in with this ultimate driving machine. And then for 9 consecutive years, they sold out Mercedes-Benz as the leading luxury car in the US. Then they switched to Joy. And you have a real problem with joy. Talk about that for a quick second.
I mean, what's a joy? I mean, it's such a generic type of word. And who's the enemy of joy? I mean, is Mercedes sadness? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it has to be a plausible alternative. And not only that, when you have something that's so strong, like the ultimate driving machine, changing it is a disastrous move. And here's the problem. It's boring to do the same thing for 30 odd years. It's boring to run the same campaign and slogan and find new ways, but that's where the real opportunity is. It is the repetition of ideas that make them even stronger, more powerful, and more believable over time. And so, that is a great challenge for companies, even for people, but it is the true opportunity that often is missed.
So this whole concept of rebranding, and it's funny, I was thinking this morning in preparation for our chat today, there has not been a corporate rebranding that I can remember that has been well received, like ever. Everyone's like, what's wrong with them? That's terrible. The new Kia logo looked like a KN. The most recent example, of course, is Cracker Barrel and that whole disaster. Pepsi going from this kind of ball to this kind of smile back to this kind of retro thing. And so is it about CMOs getting bored? Is it about CMOs wanting to win awards? What's that about, this unnecessary rebranding into financial disaster?
Well, you do find that when you get a new CMO, a new leader, they want to shake things up. They want to make their mark on their career. And what better yet to hire a new agency and think up a new strategy and do PR and do all of those things. But while they may get in the news, it's not necessarily good for the brand. And in some cases, it's really bad for the CEO too, that led that charge. And there have been successful rebrands, but usually it's because they're very minor. Most brands are doing these minor tweaks that we don't notice. Those are the kind of good rebrands. But when you have a brand that has an iconic visual hammer and you take that away, that's where it's dangerous and it gets you bad PR. That's what happened to Cracker Barrel. That's what happened to Jaguar. That's what happened to Tropicana when they took the orange and the straw away. Oh my gosh, consumers, you thought they switched it with grapefruit juice and they went nuts on that thing.
Yes.
But think about it. I was thinking about this as well. And I looked back, Airbnb did a rebrand back in 2014 where they had a word mark and they added a visual, which is kind of like a heart. It's kind of like a paperclip. Who knows? But, while initially people were like, that was a strong move. They gave themselves a visual that was iconic. And because they were a leader, a pioneer in the industry, that is now very recognizable. And they helped themselves out in that situation. So it is, it can be helpful, but on the most cases, radical change and deleting visual hammers leads to disaster.
Hey now, what a great episode, right? Are you ready to build your own market eminence game plan using the power of speaking, publishing, and podcasting? Book a chat with me to build your plan and see if and how I might help you further. The link is doitmarketing.com/call. No sales team, no pressure, no goofballs, just you and me having a CEO to CEO chat about what's possible for you and your company. Hop on with me, doitmarketing.com/call. And now, let's jump right back into the interview. Let's dig into the meat of the strategic enemy concept. This has to do, one of your first early chapters talks about categories, and that we have sort of category file folders in our minds. Talk a little bit about that, and then let's talk about how that would lead naturally to developing an enemy.
Well, because it's a big misconception that consumers care about brands. They don't. They care about categories, but they verbalize those categories as brands. So that's where it gets tricky to understand. See, you think about Tesla. Is Tesla a great brand? Or was Kodak a great brand? It was the category that they dominated that was what people were really interested and excited about. And they verbalized it with that brand name. Now, in Kodak's case, when the category goes down, so did the brand, right? That brand was inextricably tied to the category. So understanding that consumers care about categories is first and foremost in terms of strategic positioning. So thinking about what is our category? Can we be first and pioneer a new category? And if we're not first, the best strategy is to go against the leader and to be the opposite. So Walmart is always low prices, right? A cheap, great big place to buy things. What did Target do? They became Target, cheap chic, right? It was the same kind of stuff, but it was designed a little bit better. The stores are a little bit neater and brighter. And that was a very bold and powerful strategic move. Sadly, what happened? So many companies, they lose sight of what I call their anchor, that strong positioning, and they take it for granted. And now what are they doing? They're doubling back on design, right? Of becoming what Target always was. So you can never forget that, and you always have to reinforce it.
Another category, and I don't know if this is in the book or not, but it's one of my pet peeves. Geico Insurance, right? Silly, quirky, witty advertising. Now it seems every insurance company has to have these incredibly stupid prank-like ads, and like, hey, we're trying to compete with Geico. And it's like, no, Geico sort of pioneered this. They've got the gecko, they've got the cavemen, they have the whole thing. Yeah. So, the guys in the blue and yellow, Liberty and whomever else, it's like, stupid ads is not what made Geico, but they're all trying to jump into that red ocean, right?
Well, they saw how powerful a visual hammer is, but they forgot a visual hammer is called a visual hammer because it's hammering in an idea. It's connected very strongly with that positioning idea. So for Gecko, the Geico was a way to remember the name of the company, right? Geico.
Right.
But not only that, what built that brand? 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on your car insurance. It was a very oversimplified message that built that direct brand to consumers. Yes. But, the others will flow. She's going to give you advice right there at Progressive. But think about mayhem. What does that mean? All insurance is saving you from mayhem. I don't even remember which company is, right? So that's not a strong, well, the actor makes a lot of money from those commercials. It isn't driving in a verbal idea along with that visual.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know you have so many fantastic, really powerful examples, B2B examples, B2C examples. Let's start talking about some strategic enemy development. What are some of your favorites that you have in the book? And then how can we as CEOs, founders, perhaps marketing executives, how can we start to think about developing our own list of potential enemies?
Sure. Well, you'll never find an enemy unless you have a focus. It's fundamental to positioning, to branding, to running a business even. I mean, the narrow focus is what allows you to stand for something and then will allow you to find what that enemy is. And there's so many examples. At the cover of the book, you see that aluminum can squashing plastic water bottles. Well, that represents what? Liquid death taking on plastic water bottles. And everyone talks about the crazy branding, and that is an incredibly important part of the story, but it starts with a fundamental enemy: death to plastics. That, plastic bottles are ruining the environment. They're not even being recycled. And aluminum is infinitely recycled. Now, they also connected into this idea of people not drinking as much alcohol or energy drinks and wanting to be at concerts and hold a powerfully branded type of can and be cool and be seen and not stand out with a silly looking water bottle. And that was also, it connected to the whole idea and the cultural relevance that branding brings very strongly against the enemy. But even go back, if you look at B2B, Salesforce, one of the biggest companies in the world, what did they do? They didn't start by talking about how great cloud was. Before you cut in with your new category, you got to knock the old one out. And what did they do? The end of software. Very strongly against it. They picketed Oracle. They did all sorts of crazy things to make their point that software, was the wrong direction. It was too costly, takes too much time, on and on again about what the no's are of what they can provide. So, very effective, always thinking about what can we say no to? Way too many companies are always what can we say yes to? They're customer focused. We're going to make everybody happy. You'd be like Southwest. There's no seat assignments. There's no food. There's no pets. There's no. Yet they built one of the strongest and most loyal airline companies in the business by focusing in on all class. Everyone's the same. We're all treated equal. And unfortunately, they're unwinding some of that. Now, listen. Do sometimes you need to make changes? Sure. Adding seat assignments. It was chaos on the plane, right? Adding those is fine. But they should have thought about what one anchor idea can we use to what simple thing can we use to symbolize our focus on low cost? And I think it was bags fly free. That one thing is nobody else was going to do. They could have owned that and reinforced that. And not only that, that would have made loading the plane faster. One of the parts of their whole process is getting in and out of the gates quickly. And when you're carrying all your stuff because you're too cheap to check it, that becomes a problem.
So let's talk more about the power of saying no.
Yeah.
Because this is, I think the lesson here is not about advertising, marketing, whatever. It's about the soul of your business. So Chick-fil-A, which is a great example that you write about in the book.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A, of course, they have the cows, right? And the cows are saying, eat more chicken. And of course, they have hundreds of different variations of that, which means that Chick-fil-A is now locked in. They will never, ever, ever, ever be able to sell a burger. They just won't. They can't.
I certainly hope not.
Right? So that is a line in the sand, right? That we're never going to sell burgers. Come hell or high water, you'll never get a burger in our restaurant. You probably never get pizza either. But how does the enemy also help you with the focus? So obviously focus helps you develop the enemy. Once you've marketed the enemy, it also sort of constricts what you're able to do and maintain your company strategy, right?
Yes, but I mean, that's the strength and narrowing your focus, owning the idea. And what Chick-fil-A, great success. I live here in Atlanta, home of the Chick-fil-A. Category is important. Remember, they have ridden the success and increased interest in chicken itself. Even though it's fried, chicken has a more healthy halo. And so they didn't, early on, they didn't say, oh my gosh, burgers are bigger. We better jump into that. By maintaining that focus and their, brilliant campaign of the cows. Listen, we have to call them out. I mean, here's the thing. The smart company would have run it for 6 months. The insanely brilliant company has done it for 30 years. The consistency of that campaign has driven in the concept of we shouldn't have burgers today. Let's go to Chick-fil-A. And not only they said no to some other things. I mean, let's not forget they're closed on Sundays, which I mean, can you imagine for a fast food restaurant? But they held true to their corporate values on that and wanting to give Sunday off for their employees. And I think it's kind of become part of their lore. And in fact, my son is obsessed with Chick-fil-A. And somehow when you tell people they can't have something, they want it more. For us, we're like, oh my God, like it's Saturday, we better go twice. And so, it's holding true to that of what, is making you authentic and maintaining the consistency on it for the long haul.
Now, the power of saying no, I think it's also the way that you talk about it. I think it's more brand specific. So I know that in one of the earlier books, you mentioned that Kodak could have been huge in digital, but not with the name Kodak not with the color yellow.
That's right. Well, here's the thing. You can have your cake and eat it too. Meaning if you're an existing category and something else is taking off, the challenge is most companies fall in love with their brand. We're an we're Porsche, we have the best cars. If EV is taken off, of course we're going to call it a Porsche. Instead of thinking, should we have a second brand for that emerging new category that may be small now, but in the future can be enormous. And so that opportunity is often lost, particularly by big companies, and they get hammered by, the small entrepreneurs. I mean, think back, Red Bull, for example, launching an energy drinks. It took 10 years to reach $100 million. Coca-Cola doesn't get out of bed until something reaches $100 million. And they were way too late in the energy drink market. And they competed with, copycat versions, line extension versions. Being first in the mind with your brand when it's strongly positioned with a great name like Red Bull has the best potential for success. So many times companies, they launch enemies they give birth to their own enemy, I like to say. So Mike's Hard Lemonade, they wrote a great success of, being the anti-beer. Kids were liking, a sweeter alcoholic drink as opposed to beer. Great success until we all figured out how many calories and how much sugar was in that thing. It was like almost as much as a Coke. So what did they do? Instead of just launching line extension versions with less sugar or less calories, they came up with a new brand. Maybe you've heard of it. White Claw, which dominates the category hard seltzer. Now, here's the one interesting thing. White Claw wasn't first. Spiked Seltzer was first. That's a too generic a name. That's in the mind, the name is the sound itself. It doesn't differentiate between uppercase and lowercase. Yeah. So in addition to being first in the market, having the better brand is what's going to allow you to win. The same thing was true with the iPod. They didn't invent the technology, the first hard drive music player, but they branded it better. I mean, Steve Jobs was a brilliant master at this idea of, pioneering a new category and using better marketing. And the iPod, who was their enemy? It was the flash drive, Rio players. They were cheap. They were everywhere. And they went strongly against that by saying, not that it's better, but you can have 1,000 songs in your pocket. Wow. What a simple idea to communicate and get many of us, including myself, to buy this $400 thing that in 2006 was named Gadget of the Century. A little premature, but it did lead to one of the greatest new categories that Apple ever launched, which was the iPhone. Again, not positioned as a better phone or even internet, advanced. It was a smartphone, a brilliant category name that instantly repositioned Nokia, the leader in the world, as dumb, right? It was instantly a dumb phone. And that was a great case of using the strategic enemy to pioneer that new category and reposition the old category.
Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. Now, I know some people listening, entrepreneurs, executives, they like playing it safe, which is, of course, part of the problem, but they're going to read the book. They're going to read The Strategic Enemy, and they're going to say, Laura, this all sounds amazing. I get it. I want to do this. I am scared. I'm going to upset some people. Our company is going to piss some people off. Our new ads, our new positioning, our new whatever. It's going to upset some of the old guard. It's going to upset some of the establishment. We're going to get some flack for this. How do you, when you're consulting with a big company who's afraid of a PR disaster around every corner, how do you reassure them that the only people that you'll probably piss off are people who would never buy from you anyway?
This is very true. And in fact, I like to say, and, when I work on a strategy, case with a client, I mean, half the day is spent on the strategy itself. The second half of the day is spent on giving them the courage to do it. Because
Totally.
it's just as important as the strategy is the courage to do it. And that's where, the books come into play, but really talking through the ideas and concepts. And most importantly is showing them, how it relates, giving them examples in other cases, in other industries. All of those goes to, make them feel better about this being the right approach. And if you think back to it, when working particularly in a big company, many times their problem is they've lost focus over the years. And the answer is to refocus. And it shouldn't take that much courage, honestly.
Yeah.
It's house cleaning. In particular, what's challenging is, you've got all the vice presidents in the room and they expect an equal share of the marketing pie. And you've got to tell Bob and Cindy that they're not going to get the money because we're going to focus in on, this other idea. But you can't think about, running a company like you are with your kids. You want to be equal with your kids. But in the company, you have to focus in on the one idea, the one strategy, the one enemy, so that you can oversimplify your message. You can go out there and own a strong idea in the mind.
Well, it seems that we cannot have any interview about really any topic without mentioning AI. And you have a fantastic AI example in the book, which is, of course, Nvidia, the chip maker.
Yeah.
Talk about why you especially zeroed in on Nvidia for a whole chapter of their own as a success story.
Well, I started writing the case history and it was, 1 or 2 pages. And then I said, this thing is so interesting. And the whole trajectory of the company, of what they did, and really following so many of the laws of positioning. I mean, I have no credit for, in part taking part of this, but I do know some of the leaders, and I know that they were fans of the book and interviewed them through the process of the book. And I just wanted to tell that story. And so the trajectory of Nvidia's, it was a very narrowly focused of wanting to build the very best graphics card for PCs at a time where it was going from where you just could do it on workstations to now these PCs with Windows were going to take over. And the engineers were so excited to bring this gaming experience to anyone with a PC on these chips. But what happened after that is even more interesting. So while building the company, now they were in a crowded category. And to differentiate themselves, while chips were getting smaller and cheaper, what did Nvidia do? They did the opposite. They made a bigger, more expensive chip. But how are they going to sell it? Well, they had a great idea. They positioned it in a new category. It was the first GPU, an instantly understood category because we all knew the CPU, and this was now going to be the graphics, right, unit. So that was instantly understood, and that, it greatly accelerated the success of the company. But then it just so happens, sometimes you have to change your anchor. Sometimes you have to change your focus. And NVIDIA early on saw the opportunity to use these GPUs beyond just playing video games. And so they had early insights to that, but not everyone was sold on it. Yet the leader, Jensen Huang, is just a brilliant strategist as well as an engineer and running a company. He said he saw the potential of AI early on, and he said, we're going to change the focus of the company. And that was back in 2012. And everyone thought he was crazy, and the stock went down, but they held true to it. And you need a strong leader to hold a focus like that. And what happened? It paid off. They gave money or gave computers to early AI and open AI, which led to ChatGPT and everything else. And they became the pioneer. Being first is so powerful. And they today embody AI in terms of technology and chips. But here's what's interesting. They still make graphics cards. They're still, seen as the leader and the best in graphics cards, but they don't promote it.
Yeah.
right? They've got that market. They put all their time and attention on the future on this AI focus, which is a very good strategy that very few companies do. Again, they try to, play it equally and talk about all of their products instead of talking about the one that they're intently focused on.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Let's talk about maybe just some baby steps as people are reading through the book. What should their thought process be around all of these concepts we've talked about so far? Focusing, clarity, distinction, finding, a potential list of enemies, and then maybe even filtering down which one might make the most clear enemy to start with.
Well, you've got to see, the big choice and understanding is of your situation of what are we inventing a new category? Can we invent a new category?
Yeah.
Not everyone has the luxury of doing that, right? And so either you're inventing a new category. In those cases, you want to make the old category the enemy. So how can you position as different to, make the old category seem outdated? So, Canva is the easy to use graphic interface for anybody to use. Adobe, serious for designers, for, that's one area. We're going to be different. And so, classifying it, whether it's easy or hard, expensive or cheap, even you have a cell phone brand called it's not a cell phone, it's a cell phone cover. They make square cases. They have that narrow focus that differentiates them. Now, is square better? Who knows? But it's different. And that makes them stand out. It makes them remembered. And it's something, different and unusual. So again, think about who the leader is. In many cases, you're going up against that leader. How can we be different than the leader? What weaknesses in that leadership? Because there's always a weakness in the greatest of strengths. Think about Walmart. They're cheap, but they're not fashionable. You think about Amazon. They sell everything today on the internet, but Shopify has very strongly competed and become a very powerful number two by being the merchant hero. They're on the side of the merchants. And for small companies wanting to set up their shop on the internet, Shopify is a much better experience and offers them a lot more help and support and everything that goes along with it. So thinking about how to go up against them and to show some kind of contrast. And even better if you can visualize that contrast.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Absolutely.
Well, you think about the other one, because sometimes it comes down to packaging itself. We already talked about liquid death being in cans, but the new olive oil brand, Graza, right? It's in a squeeze bottle. Now, chefs for years have been doing this, but they, pioneered in being, for consumers. They've got the sizzle and the drizzle, and they made it very simple, very clear in that unique, iconic green squeezable bottle. And that's a great strategy of being different. Sometimes not in the product, but sometimes just even the package itself.
I'm curious, when you're looking at a product category versus when you're looking at a service category, the product folks, I think, can really track along with your strategies. Talk for a little bit about what a law firm might do, what a consulting firm might do, what an accounting firm might do. What do you think about professional services when it comes to strategic enemies?
Sure, it's incredibly important because they don't have the ability to have a product that is visible, right? So they've got to do even more work. And to B2B, those are very serious type of situations when you're making those decisions. You really don't want to be wrong, and so you do go with the brand that you feel is the best choice and that you can defend to your boss of why you chose them. And here's the thing. The biggest thing is what can we specialize in, right? So it either, do we do big companies? Do we do small companies? Do we do, we only work with landscapers? We only work with doctors? How can you be perceived? The specialist is perceived to be better, whether or not it's true. Think about a doctor. If you need a brain surgery, you're going to go to your general practitioner or are you going to go to a brain specialist? Yeah. I think you would go to the brain specialist. And most companies are trying to be general practitioners and going after everyone instead of, and here's the thing, it's not that you can't take on a client that doesn't fall within your focus, but what marketing is to get new new customers, new prospects. That website is not for your current customers. The ones that are going to your website are the customers you're trying to get. So that's where the messaging is incredibly important and why you want to keep it narrowly focused to get those customers the first time. Because once you have them, they're customers, right? And you can maybe sell them other things. But what is that first sale going to look like? What is the best proposition for that first sale? What's the best pitch? What best differentiates us from other competitors that will get invited to the pitch? So I think, thinking in those narrow terms of what it's going to take to get someone interested and to get on the phone with you or to come and see you or to check you out on the website first.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My little mantra around that, Laura, is target what you want and you can always take what comes.
That's exactly it. But most people are they want a big net. They think a big net is going to get more fish. You want a very strategic net that makes you stand for something and you seen as a specialist. And listen, the best line positioning you can ever use is leadership. When you're the leader in whatever XYZ category, in whatever business or service, the leader, people think it's better. And that's where the mind comes into play. I mean, if you say you're better, people say, I don't believe you. And if you're not the leader, you can't be better. But if you're the leader, now we have something. Now you have credentials that are instantly accepted.
Talk about that leadership concept a little bit more. Is this a label that we apply to ourselves? Is this a label that we highlight when we get a testimonial or a client success story? How do we establish that aura of leadership?
Sure. It depends on, it depends on the category. For example, black box wine, right? They wanted to sell wine in a box, but this is not perceived as good wine. So they needed credentials. And what did they do for wine? It's about winning awards. So they actively went after all of these different, awards and medals, and they put all those right there on the box to convince us that the wine was better and was, just as good as wine in a bottle. So, depending on your industry, being, having accolades, having some sort of numbers or statistics in the newspaper of you being the leader in whatever industry it is, that is very, very powerful.
Yes. So external validation, indisputable points of proof, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Help you establish that leadership positioning.
That was the initial concept of positioning itself. My father's idea was that before they thought of the word positioning, he called it the rock. It was an indisputable truth that people couldn't argue with, and it would be instantly accepted. So, they had Uniroyal as a client, and they could have said, Uniroyal makes the best rubber on the road. Not believable. Instead, the headline said, Uniroyal has more patents than any other company on the road. And that was an indisputable proof. I mean, you had statistics that back that up. So, having some sort of, credentials like that, it's the third party endorsement. It's why PR is so powerful. What others say about you is much more believable than what you say yourself. So absolutely, client testimonials, any, type of information. Now, unfortunately, people can lie and post fake testimonials, unfortunately. So, you definitely have to back those up. Videos are great, but the best is word of mouth itself. When someone says, hey, Bob, you got to call Sally. She's the one to go to. Right. That continues to be the most powerful driver. But you've got to give Bob something to say. Right. So you think about, when you buy a car, when someone says, oh, what'd you buy? Oh, BMW. It's an ultimate driving machine. I mean, it's something that you can actually use in conversation. Yet, what did Ford do? Ford said, find new roads was their slogan. Find new roads. Have you ever asked someone why they bought a car to find new roads? Are you kidding me?
Right. Yes. Well, you bring up another great point here. Just as we're landing the plane, I'd love to, 1 minute on this. Having a strategic enemy also fuels all of these things like word of mouth and referrals and just person to person, like giving someone the blueprint of how to talk about us, right? It's like, oh my God, Salesforce, you no longer have to install anything on your computer. Really? Oh, I should check that out. That gave someone a talking point.
That's right.
For a human to human referral, right?
Absolute. That is you got it. You read the book. No, it driving what I call the great debate, because people just don't want to say why XYZ is great. If they can talk about it in relation to something else, why, if you're Toomey or Ramoa, right? You got soft luggage, you got hard luggage. Or in dating, what did Bumble do? They said on Bumble, no, men can't swipe right on you or whatever it is on the Tinder. Women can only make the first move. And you can think in conversation, I'm not on Bumble. I'm very well married, but my friend is on it. My friend. And, but I mean, that's what they talk about. Yeah, we don't have to deal with, having to wait for the man to make the move. I can decide who I want to move on. And just so happens where the women are, the men come following. And so that's a great place to, find a lovely woman if you're a dating man.
There you go. Well, I've got two final questions for you as we're landing the plane. The final question is, where can people go to find out more about Strategic Enemy and all of your amazing work? But before we get to that, if folks were to take one overarching idea from our whole conversation today about the Strategic Enemy, what would you hope that big takeaway concept for them would be?
Figure out what you want to stand against. Instead of starting what you are, what you want to be, what are you going to fight against? Is it going to be plastic water bottles? Is it going to be dry dog food? Is it going to be men swiping right on Tinder? What is it going to be? What's that problem that you can identify, offer the solution, and make that the enemy? And I think, starting from that framework will put you in a much better position to have a more focused brand, to use that enemy and have a great, strong positioning strategy.
Fantastic. Well, Laura Ries, this is awesome. Tell us about where we can get our hands on the Strategic Enemy. What links should go in the show notes?
Absolutely. Well, it is available wherever books are sold. You can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and you can find out all about me. You can sign up for my newsletter right on Ries.com, and it's RIES.
Excellent. And all of those links and goodies will be right below this episode at thesellingshow.com. Laura Ries, such a fantastic book, such a powerful idea. Thank you for all the value that you dropped on our listeners right here, right now.
So fun.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.